There was a white pickup sitting in my driveway at 2:13 on a Tuesday afternoon. I cut the engine at the curb, left my hands on the wheel, and didn't move. His truck was still running, heater on. Outside, the tail end of winter had turned the sky the color of old dishwater, and the naked elms running the length of Harmon Drive cast long shadows across my hood. Thin, parallel lines, like cracks spreading through something that was never as solid as it looked. I stayed put for a full 60 seconds. Here's something worth knowing about me. I keep track of things, not because anyone asked me to. It's just the way my mind has always processed the world. I count the rotations of a ceiling fan before I fall asleep. I count the steps from the elevator to my broadcast desk, 39 if you take the left corridor. For the past 9 months, I'd been counting cash withdrawals on our shared checking account, $250 at a time. Mondays and Wednesdays steady as a mortgage payment. I'd been logging those figures without doing anything about them, not because the pattern confused me, but because I wasn't prepared to act on it yet. Standing at the curb that Tuesday afternoon, watching a man's engine idle in my own driveway, I finally was. I entered through the mudroom off the back. The deadbolt was quiet. I'd rekeyed the lock myself 8 months ago during a Sunday project my wife Ellen had called excessive. I pushed the door open 2 inches and let the house come to me. What I heard from upstairs required no interpretation. I stood in the kitchen for exactly 14 seconds. I counted each one. The refrigerator clicked. My daughter Wren's drawing was held to the door with a sunflower magnet, 5 stick figures and a horse, even though we'd never owned one. I stood looking at it. Then I backed out through the same door I came in, eased it shut without a sound, and walked to my truck. I sat behind the wheel and started doing arithmetic. 38 Mondays, 38 Wednesdays. Close to 10 months if you start counting from February, which the first withdrawal suggested. Owen Cassidy, who'd spent the last 6 years sitting across from me at the broadcast desk, who always ended every show by asking how Ellen was. The kind of question a man asks when he already has the answer and enjoys watching you not have it. The faint perfume I'd caught on the passenger headrest of my own truck months ago. Ellen's perfume, the one she only wore when she wanted to be somewhere she'd be noticed. I'd kept driving with that smell, telling myself it didn't mean what it meant. 38 Mondays, I said out loud to nobody. 38 Wednesdays, 10 months. I'd been keeping score on the wrong side of the ledger. I pulled away without looking back at the house. The 6 o'clock show ran without a hitch. I was in the booth at 5:42, copy sorted, board levels checked, water topped off. Our engineer, a quiet kid named Teller who communicated mostly through nods and the occasional thumbs up, gave me the 90-second cue, and I settled in and felt that familiar narrowing that comes when the on-air light goes red. Everything outside the glass becoming irrelevant, everything inside it sharpening to a point. Owen came in at 5:57, hair not quite right, a half beat behind his usual rhythm. He smelled like Ellen's perfume, which doesn't belong on a man. He was specific as a signature. He dropped into his chair and picked up the rundown I'd placed on his side of the desk. I didn't look up. "Ready?" he said. "Always." We ran 94 minutes of sports radio. I fed him 2 easy segments, the kind that played well with the afternoon crowd, and wrapped at 7:32. Owen was capable on air. I'd always known that. He'd borrowed his delivery from mine, his authority from proximity to my credibility, his audience from 6 years of sitting next to someone listeners already trusted. I'd known all of that. What I hadn't fully understood was the complete accounting of what that arrangement had cost me. "Good show, Brennan." Same as always. I was already pulling my coat off the hook. Pastor Miles Aubrey answered his office door at 8:51 without any visible surprise. He read my face the way experienced men read incoming weather. Not the forecast, just the present condition, and stepped aside to let me through. "Sit down," he said. "I'll put the kettle on." His office smelled like old paper and candle wax. A heavy oak desk, 2 worn chairs, a shelf of reference books that had clearly been used, a lamp with a warm circle of light that left the corners in shadow. I sat down and laid the manila folder on his desk. He came back with 2 mugs, settled across from me, and opened the folder without ceremony. 9 months of bank statements. Ellen's phone records from our shared plan, which I'd pulled 3 months ago and hadn't yet acted on. Time-stamped screenshots of the joint account withdrawals, every Monday and Wednesday entry consistent as a tide. He read without comment. The building fund, he said eventually. Ellen's name was on a cash envelope back in January. The donation was supposed to cover new chairs for the fellowship hall. A pause. The chairs never came. I assumed a miscommunication on the vendor's end. Keep the $250, I said. I'll cover it. He looked at me over his mug. What do you need? A name. Someone thorough. Someone who doesn't flinch. He picked up a notepad, wrote 2 words, tore the sheet, and pushed it across the desk. Dara Finch. She's on Stratton Avenue, Miles said. 3rd floor. Tell her I sent you. She'll make time tomorrow. I folded the paper into my breast pocket. I drove home at 10:15. Ellen was in the kitchen with a glass of wine and an easy expression, the performance of a woman who had spent her afternoon doing absolutely nothing worth accounting for. She'd showered twice. I could tell by the particular dampness at the nape of her neck and by the fact that the perfume she'd been wearing was gone, swapped out for something floral and ordinary. How was the show, she said. Same as always. I kissed her cheek. She smelled like soap. I went upstairs, looked in on the kids, stood in the dark of Wren's room for a long time watching her breathe. She was 5. 5 stick figures on the refrigerator, a horse that didn't exist. I went to the guest room, opened my laptop, and started building the folder. What happened over the next 3 days would change everything, and I was only beginning to understand the shape of what I was dealing with. 3 days later, I left a bank statement on the kitchen counter. Not by accident. Ellen found it before breakfast. She came downstairs holding it the way people carry things they want you to believe they discovered by chance. Why are you going through the accounts? I poured my coffee. I look at the accounts. It's a joint account. You're checking up on me. I'm reading a statement. She put it down on the counter between us. This is humiliating, you understand that. How much did the building fund bring in, Ellen? She touched her earring. A small gold hoop. She pressed it with one finger, pulled slightly, let it go. I watched her do it. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. The fellowship hall chairs. January. You handled the collection. She looked away and filled her glass, coffee in the cup, but the gesture was identical to reaching for the wine. Looking elsewhere while her hands moved. That was months ago. I don't remember the exact figure. That's fine, I said. She dropped the statement on the counter and walked out. I heard her on the stairs, then the bedroom door pulling shut. I picked the statement up, carried it to the folder upstairs. The folder now had 41 pages. I needed 42. Remember that in the description and in the pinned comment you'll find all our supplements, from fitness to health, in every sense of the word. Dara Finch's office was on the 3rd floor of the Stratton building, one window facing a parking structure. A desk the size of a door laid flat, and the kind of fluorescent lighting that reveals everything equally. She was compact, early 50s, with the particular stillness of someone who had spent 2 decades watching people attempt to lie convincingly. She read the folder for 5 minutes without speaking. I sat across from her and listened to the building, an elevator down the hall, a muffled phone call through the wall, the faint electrical hum of the overhead lights. Finch closed the folder. She'll argue child support for 2 kids, she said. Let's establish whose children they actually are. I've already ordered the tests. Results in 6 weeks. Something shifted in her expression. Not surprise. Something more like recalibration. The look of someone whose initial assessment has just been revised upward. How long have you been building this? 3 months since I pulled the phone records. And she has no idea. She thinks I'm a man who doesn't notice things. Finch looked at the folder again. Stop touching the accounts. Don't move out. Don't say anything to her. Not yet. She paused. The moment you leave the house, she files for emergency temporary support, and the court grants it pending a hearing. You become the income source with no leverage. You stay in the house. The documentation keeps accumulating. We file first, on our schedule, not hers. Understood. There's a second issue. She tapped the folder. Her attorney will go after your broadcasting income as a marital asset. Contract renewals, syndication royalties, everything earned during the marriage. That's a significant figure. I slid one more document across her desk. My late father's property in Caldwell County, a 38-acre parcel held in the estate for 2 years since his passing, never transferred because I'd been waiting for the right structure. Behind it, the royalty schedule from my broadcasting contract. 6 years of accumulated syndication payments, a number that would look substantial to any opposing attorney. Finch read both documents. I want these in a protected trust for the children before she files, I said. Both kids sole beneficiaries administered through Pastor Miles Aubrey at Calvary Community. Can it be done in 10 days? Finch looked up. It can be done in 7. Can you do 6? She nearly smiled. Miles sent you. She wrote something. He sends me men who've already done their homework. She stood and extended her hand. Don't touch the accounts. Don't move out. Don't say a word. I know. Brennan, she held the handshake. Whatever you're carrying right now, put it somewhere cold. You're going to need access to it later. I drove home with the fluorescent hum of her office still in my ears, running the numbers in my head, trying to stay ahead of what was coming. Sunday morning. Walt Giddings was on his porch with a mug in one hand and a composition notebook on the armrest, pencil worn to a nub, pages soft from months of weather, a pair of binoculars leaning against the porch railing the way a retired man's tools are always simply present. Walt was 73, 31 years on the Harmon Drive mail route before his back gave out. He knew every house on this street better than the people inside them knew themselves. I walked up his front path. Walt, the white pickup. He didn't ask which pickup. He picked up the notebook, opened to a tabbed section, and handed it to me. Every arrival, every departure, dates going back to December 29th, earlier than I had calculated, which meant the cash withdrawals had started before the visits, which meant there had been a planning period I hadn't accounted for. Plate numbers for Owen's truck and 2 vehicles I didn't recognize. A silver Accord and a dark green minivan that appeared in the early months before the routine settled into Mondays and Wednesdays. Walt's handwriting was small and exact, the handwriting of a man who spent 3 decades logging addresses for a living. Figured someone would come asking for this eventually, Walt said. He drank his coffee. Didn't think it'd take you this long. Why didn't you say something sooner? He looked at me steadily. I thought about it. Then I figured I'd keep the record clean until it was my place to speak up. He paused. Now it is. I took the notebook. My hands were steady. I'll get this back to you. Keep it. I made copies. He tapped the side of his head. And up here, I walked back to my truck. The notebook felt heavier than paper has any right to feel. What I found at the station that Tuesday morning changed everything. Remember that in the description and in the pinned comment you'll find all our supplements, from fitness to health, in every sense of the word. Philip Holt was in the WKRL parking structure on level 2 at 7:04, loading equipment cases into the station van. I parked, walked over, and stopped 6 feet from him. He saw me coming and went still in the specific way of a man who has been bracing for something bad and has finally stopped being surprised that it's arrived. How long, Philip? He held out for 37 seconds. His eyes moved to the stairwell, to the exit ramp, to a point in the middle distance where there was nothing useful. Then he was pulling out his phone with hands that weren't entirely steady, scrolling to screenshots, pulling up a voicemail he'd saved on a secondary device. A secondary device, which meant he'd known this moment might come and had prepared for it in the way cowards do. The way that protects yourself while pretending to protect a secret. His voice broke on the word sorry. I took the phone, transferred the files to mine, and handed it back. I'm not interested in your apology. I'm interested in your signature on a witness statement. Philip wept, not quietly. The full thing. shoulders shaking, one hand over his face. His coffee thermos slipped off the van bumper where he'd balanced it and hit the concrete floor. The lid popped off. The coffee spread in a dark pool across the garage. He didn't pick it up. I walked to the elevator without thanking him. The broken thing stayed broken. Finch's paralegal was a woman named Cass, early 40s, with the efficient manner of someone who had processed enough of other people's disasters that she'd stopped performing sympathy about it. She handed me a packet of forms in the waiting room on my second visit. "There's a lot of paperwork in the first month," she said. "It gets quieter. I don't mind paperwork." She looked at me for a moment. "I went through mine 5 years ago. Took me a while to figure out what I actually needed." She straightened the packet between my hands. "A friend pointed me toward an app called ClearPath. Not for dating, not at first. The values assessment it runs told me more about what I actually required than years of therapy had. You answer questions about what you believe, what you've survived, what you won't compromise on. It shows you who matches on those things." I was already reading the trust documents. "Right," I said, but the words registered somewhere. Values, what you won't compromise on. I filed it alongside the other things I wasn't ready to act on yet. Ellen's attorney filed on a Thursday. Emergency temporary support motion. Broadcasting income flagged as a marital asset. 2 children listed as dependents. The judge granted it pending a full hearing. For 4 weeks, I submitted transfers. $2,100 every Friday. Direct withdrawal. My hands didn't shake. I watched the account drain and thought about Walt's notebook and Finch's files. About the DNA results, still 3 weeks out. About the children's trust that had been executed in 6 days and was now legally airtight. I moved into the Alderton on a Saturday. Cold tile floors, bare walls. The smell of whatever the previous tenant had used to clean. I taped Wren's drawing above the kitchen sink, 5 stick figures and a horse, and stood back and looked at it. It was the first thing that made the space feel like mine. The following Thursday, Wren was with me for the overnight. I was running settlement projections in my head while she ate cereal at the kitchen table. The numbers Finch had called reasonable, the range a rational man could live with. Wren climbed down from her chair, crossed to where I was standing at the counter, and put her arms up. I picked her up. She looked at the drawing above the sink. She looked at me. "Daddy, is our house broken?" I held her for a long time. She smelled like her strawberry shampoo, the kind Ellen bought in large bottles. I pressed my face against the top of her head and stayed there. I put her down at 8:30, came back to the kitchen, stood at the counter for a while, picked up my phone. "Finch, no settlement, we go to hearing." A pause. "You're certain?" "I'm certain." The DNA results came on a Thursday. I was in the booth when the notification hit my phone. I didn't open the email until after the show. I sat in the parking structure for 7 minutes, engine running, heater on, and read the document 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Finch with one line: "Seal it. We use it at the hearing." I drove to my rented apartment, made 2 sandwiches, and sat watching Wren sleep on the pullout I'd assembled for her overnight visits. The numbers had stopped being abstract. Ellen came into the WKRL green room at 7:19 on a Wednesday morning, moving with the controlled precision of a woman who'd rehearsed the approach. Hair done, the navy coat, the one she wore when she needed to feel armored. I was eating a granola bar and reading the morning rundown. "Whatever Philip told you," she said, "he's been unstable for months. Everyone here knows it." I did not look up. "Philip told me the dates. I already had the dates." She stopped. The performance flickered. A small adjustment around the eyes, the kind of micro-expression you only catch when you've been watching someone's face for 15 years. She touched her earring, twice. "You're going to burn everything to the ground over nothing." "I'm not burning anything, Ellen." I set down the granola bar. "I'm just counting." "Counting." She said it like a diagnosis. "That's all you've ever done. Count everything. Tally everything. Stand there with your numbers while everything real just. She picked up my coffee mug from the table and threw it at the wall. It bounced off the drywall and landed on the carpet. Didn't break. We both looked at it. She left. I walked over, picked the mug up, set it back on the table. The coffee had sloshed but hadn't spilled. I made a note in the margin about a segment 2 timing issue, finished the granola bar, and went to the booth. 30 minutes later, Owen came in. He closed the door behind him. In 6 years of working together, he had never once closed the door. His face was doing several things at once, something that wanted to be confidence, something underneath it that clearly wasn't. He was a large man, Owen, physically imposing in a way he'd always used to occupy slightly more space than a room required. "We need to talk about what you think you're doing." I was arranging my copy on the desk. I didn't look up. "I don't think anything, Cassidy. I have 38 Mondays documented, a neighbor's logbook, your voicemails, a bank trail. What I think doesn't factor into it." The silence in the booth had a particular weight. The soundproofing made it complete. No ambient noise from the hallway, no traffic from outside. Just the two of us and the equipment and the dead air between us. Owen's hand moved toward the equipment rack on his right. His fingers touched the edge of it. For 4 seconds, the room was a different kind of room. Then he sat down, put on his headset. We did the show. 91 minutes of sports radio, 2 commercial breaks, a call-in segment about the upcoming draft, a brief on-air disagreement about defensive efficiency that we'd done some version of 100 times before. The audience heard 2 professionals. They always had. "Good show, Brennan." Same as always. I was already pulling my coat off the hook. The preliminary hearing was on a Tuesday. County Family Court, 2nd floor, Judge Patricia Osei presiding. The marble floors in the main corridor carried sound strangely, footsteps arriving before the person did, voices persisting after the speaker had moved on. Ellen's attorney was a man named Calloway, prepared, polished, 3 exhibits arranged on his table like a man who'd done this several hundred times because he had. He presented the income argument in 14 minutes. Broadcasting contract, syndication royalties, 11 years of marital accumulation. Clean work. I'd expected nothing less. Finch presented the Children's Trust documentation. Judge Osei studied it. She had a habit of setting papers down with deliberate placement, not dropping them, not sliding them, but placing them like someone who wants to think before she speaks. Calloway objected to the timing of the trust's creation. He argued it looked like strategic concealment given the proximity to the filing date. The judge overruled. The trust had been legally established before filing. The children were named beneficiaries. The administration was through a licensed institution with a clean financial record. The assets held. Ellen's face did something complicated. She leaned toward Calloway and whispered. He whispered back. She shook her head once, sharply. "Your Honor, my client requests a continuance to evaluate the trust documentation." Denied. We proceed. I kept my expression neutral. Finch made a small note on her legal pad. We left the courtroom with the trust intact and Calloway's primary argument substantially reduced. In the elevator, Finch said, "That's the first piece." I nodded. We walked to our cars without celebrating. Remember that in the description and in the pinned comment you'll find all our supplements, from fitness to health in every sense of the word. The Crestwood School pickup lane on Wednesdays moved like slow water, cars feeding in from the north entrance, teachers walking kids to the curb, the controlled low-grade chaos of 100 parents competing for 40 feet of asphalt. I was third from the front, watching my son Marcus's class come through the double doors, when the battered Outback pulled in 2 spots ahead of me. A woman got out, late 30s maybe, the kind of age that reads exactly as what it is, with no performance in any direction. Dark jacket, work boots, the efficient movement of someone who has been loading and unloading her own life long enough that it's just how she moves. "Cal, Mira, let's go." 2 kids materialized from the stream of children and climbed into the back without drama. She caught me watching. She didn't look away first. I rolled down my window. I hadn't planned to. Rough week, she said. Rough year. She considered this without sympathy or its opposite. Those are the ones that actually mean something afterward. Her name was Nadia Ellsworth, electrician. She said it the way people state facts about themselves. She'd been through her own custody split. 2.5 years, 3 attorneys, 1 judge who finally read the room correctly. She didn't ask about my situation. Instead, she talked about the work of rewiring a panel in the dark after the power's already been cut. About how you learn to move by feel when you can't see the connections because you built the system yourself and you know where the wires run. You trust the work you laid down before the lights went out. Marcus came out. I waved him over. Nadia loaded her kids, gave me a small nod that carried no particular meaning and yet landed somewhere specific, and pulled out of the lane. I drove home, running that image through my head for 40 minutes. That night, I couldn't sleep. The apartment was quiet in the way unfamiliar places are. No creak in the floor I recognized, no settling sound I could name. I scrolled without direction and landed on a thread in a divorced parents forum. Someone describing ClearPath's values assessment as the first genuinely honest conversation they'd had with themselves in years. I read the entire thread, not skimming. People describing what the questions had surfaced for them, what they believed about loyalty, what they'd survived, what they were no longer willing to compromise on. The idea that a marriage's failure might not lie in the betrayal at the end, but in the misalignment at the beginning. 2 people who looked exactly right in every photograph and were wrong in every calculation, who never shared the same arithmetic. I didn't sign up. I closed the tab. But I sat with it for a long time, bare feet on cold tile, just sitting with it. The following Wednesday, Nadia was in the pickup lane again. We waved, that was all. Ellen was 4 cars behind me in her car. I spotted her in the rearview mirror and felt the particular attention that comes from watching someone about to make a significant error. She got out and walked toward my window. "Don't," I said quietly. She was already past that. She looked at Nadia's car, looked back at me. Her voice carried across the entire pickup lane. "You're actually doing this? Bringing her here, in front of Marcus and Ren? Nadia is a parent at this school. I spoke to her for 5 minutes. You were sitting in your car. Don't use that voice on me." "What voice?" "The voice that says you've already won." She was crying now, the specific kind that starts as a performance and then escapes the performer and becomes something real underneath it. 11 other parents had gone completely still. A teacher was already moving toward us. I opened my door. Ellen grabbed my arm. I looked at her hand on my sleeve, then removed it, 1 finger at a time, without looking at her face. I got Marcus and Ren settled in the back seat, buckled Ren in. She'd been with me since that morning. I pulled out. In the rearview mirror, Ellen stood in the pickup lane with a teacher's hand on her arm and nothing left to throw at me. Marcus stared at his shoes. Ren reached across the seat and took his hand. I drove. Finch called at 9:15 that night. She always waited until I'd put the kids down. I'd learned that about her. The DNA results have been formally submitted to the court. Ellen's attorney has been notified. A pause, the sound of someone choosing their words with the care of a person who understands they are about to change the shape of another person's life. "Brennan, one of the 2 is not a match." I sat down on the kitchen floor, cold tile, bare feet. I stayed there for a long time, counting the ceiling tiles in the dark. I called Finch at 6 in the morning. "Which one?" She said it quietly. "Ren." The 4 seconds that followed were the longest 4 seconds in this story. I know how that sounds, like something a man says looking back, trying to give weight to a moment he needs to mean more than it did. But I was counting. I always count. And those 4 seconds were each a complete thing with their own weight and their own texture, and I felt every single one of them. Then I said, "She's still mine, Finch. I don't care what the paper says. She's mine. Use it in court for the custody calculation. That's the only use it gets." Silence on the line. "You understand what you're doing. I'm protecting 2 kids. That's the whole job." Another pause. Finch had been doing this work for 23 years, and I could hear that this particular call was settling differently than most of them. All right. Court use only. Court use only. I hung up, made coffee, stood at the kitchen sink looking at Wren's drawing above it. 5 stick figures. A horse. 5 figures. One of them was me. The smallest one. The one with the round head and the arms going straight out like she was already flying somewhere the rest of us hadn't reached, was Wren. I drank my coffee and didn't feel sorry for myself. There wasn't time for that. The night before the hearing, I had everything. Owen's home address, his broadcast schedule, his vehicle registration, his email archive, courtesy of Philip, who had apparently saved everything with the methodical thoroughness of a man who always suspected he'd need an exit strategy. 2 months of booth recordings pulled from the WKRL archive under my contracted performance review rights. Philip's voicemail, clean and time-stamped, Owen's voice saying things that would dismantle a career before the first commercial break. I wrote the script. It took 35 minutes. The kind of piece that goes out on the 8 a.m. show and gets forwarded everywhere by noon. Specific and true, and specific truth is the thing people can never stop circulating. I read it twice, then I deleted it. That's not justice, I said to the empty apartment. That's just noise. I saved the recordings. I labeled the file, CRT use only. I sat with that label for a moment, knowing what it meant. That I'd wanted the weapon, that I'd built it, that the want was real and the building was real and the choice not to use it was also real. All 3 things true at once, none of them canceling the others. I'm not a clean man. I want to be clear about that. I constructed something designed to destroy another person's professional life, and I felt a grim satisfaction in the building of it. The deletion was a decision, not an absence of desire. I went to bed at 11:45. I did not sleep well. Nadia texted at 11:52. Still up. Figured you might be. I looked at the phone for a moment. Then, yeah, hearing tomorrow, she replied. I know. Then, after a minute, wiring a panel in the dark. You know where the connections are. Trust the work you laid down. We ended up talking for over an hour, not about the case. She didn't ask and I didn't offer. She talked about her own hearing, the night before it, 2 years back, how she'd made herself describe every room in her house from memory as a grounding exercise, how the describing had become a kind of inventory, what was hers, what she was keeping, what she was done with. Did you try ClearPath? I asked. I don't know why I asked it then. It came out of a different part of the conversation, the part that had been running underneath the whole time. 4 months after my divorce was final, she said. I wasn't ready before that. A pause. The values assessment was the thing. They ask you questions that no dating profile ever asks. What you've survived, what you believe about how people deserve to be treated, what you absolutely will not give up again. Another pause. It matched me with someone whose answers looked like mine. We talked for 3 weeks before we met in person. By then, I already knew. What were your answers? She was quiet for a moment. Then she told me 2 of them. I recognized them both. I lay in the dark after we hung up, staring at the ceiling. The cold tile of the bathroom was 6 feet from where I lay. Wren's drawing was above the sink. The hearing was in 8 hours, somewhere in this same city. Ellen was sleeping or not sleeping, and Owen was whatever he was. And I was here, counting the ceiling tiles and recognizing the answers of a woman I'd spoken to 4 times. I fell asleep at 1:40. I was up at 5. Remember that in the description and in the pinned comment you'll find all our supplements, from fitness to health in every sense of the word. Finch's office, 7:25 in the morning. Pastor Miles Aubrey was already there when I arrived, seated in the client chair with a leather portfolio on his lap, wearing the dark charcoal cardigan he put on when he was there to work. No lapel pin, the cardigan that said, "This isn't Sunday." He'd placed a notarized statement on Finch's desk, the withdrawal pattern, the phantom donation, his administration of the Children's Trust, fully documented. Behind it, a second document, Finch picked it up, read it. Her expression shifted. "This is a letter from Ellen's therapist." "Not the content," Miles said. "Session dates only, available as a scheduling record, not privileged." He folded his hands on the portfolio. "The dates align precisely with the withdrawal pattern. Mondays and Wednesdays, 10 months. Finch set the letter down with the careful placement of a woman who has just been handed something she didn't know she needed. "Pastor, you just handed me the corroboration for the financial pattern argument." "I know what I handed you." Miles looked at me. "I'm not here to destroy her. I'm here because those children need a stable foundation." I nodded. Finch's paralegal Cass appeared in the doorway. "Miss Finch, the courthouse just called. Owen Cassidy's attorney has requested to appear as an interested party." Finch looked at me. I looked at her. "He can request," Finch said. "The court will tell him what it tells everyone who shows up uninvited to someone else's divorce proceeding." She picked up her briefcase. "Let's go." Courthouse parking lot, 8:47 in the morning. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't immediately place. Then I recognized it. Teller, the WKRL engineer, who communicated almost exclusively in nods and the occasional thumbs up. "Owen's gone. HR called him in first thing this morning. Don't know the details. Thought you should know." I stood in the parking lot and read it 3 times. Philip. It had to be Philip. The man had been in a slow collapse for 2 weeks, the kind that expresses itself in small catastrophic administrative errors, the kind that happen when someone is managing too many secrets across too many devices and his hands are no longer steady enough for the contact list. Owen's career hadn't ended because I filed a complaint. It had ended because the coward who'd been carrying his secrets for 10 months had accidentally forwarded the entire screenshot archive to the station's HR director instead of to Finch's paralegal. I stood in that parking lot and allowed myself one small, cold moment of satisfaction. Then I put the phone in my pocket and walked toward the entrance. The marble floors carried my footsteps ahead of me. I could hear them arriving before I did. Ellen was in the hallway outside the courtroom with Calloway. She saw me coming. She touched her earring. I walked past her without stopping. The hearing was in 30 minutes. I had everything I needed. And for the first time in 10 months, the number I was counting toward was one I had chosen myself. Judge Osei's courtroom had the quality of a room that had absorbed a great deal of human damage and reflected none of it back. Institutional walls, dark wood bench, fluorescent lighting that gave everything the same flat exposure, no shadows, no mercy from the architecture. We sat. Calloway arranged his exhibits. Finch arranged hers. The bench creaked when Judge Osei settled in. Calloway went first. He was good. I'll give him that without reservation. He laid out the income argument with the smooth authority of a man who'd run this particular play before and had it work. Broadcasting contract, syndication royalties, 11 years of marital accumulation. He cited precedent. He was polished and well-timed, and he understood exactly what he was doing. Then Finch stood up. She didn't rush. She placed the children's trust documentation on the bar, and behind it the bank records, and behind those, Walt's notebook, properly notarized, Walt having sat in Finch's office the previous week with the patience of a man who'd been waiting for exactly this appointment. Behind the notebook, Philip's witness statement, signed and witnessed by Cass. Behind the statement, the therapist's letter Miles had provided. And at the back of the stack, in a sealed exhibit envelope, the DNA results. Calloway saw the envelope. His posture changed by 1 degree, the kind of shift only someone watching for it would notice. Finch spoke for 24 minutes. She was not polished. She was precise, which is a different thing entirely and far more dangerous in a courtroom. She walked the court through the withdrawal pattern, the phantom donation, the documented visits, the trust established legally and administered cleanly, the royalties now protected, the property now held for 2 children who needed stability more than any adult in that room needed leverage. Then she set the sealed envelope on the bar. "Your Honor, at this time I'd like to submit genetic testing results relevant to the matter of paternity and child support apportionment." Calloway was on his feet immediately. Objection, Your Honor. Relevance, and the defense has not been given adequate time to. Notification was provided to opposing counsel last Thursday. Finch said it without raising her voice. Adequate time was provided. Judge Osei held out her hand. The bailiff brought the envelope. She opened it. She read. The courtroom went very quiet. The bench creaked. Ellen's hands, folded on the table in front of her, went still in the way hands go still when the body stops pretending. Judge Osei placed the papers down with her particular deliberate placement, not sliding them, not dropping them. She looked at Calloway. She looked at Finch. She looked at Ellen. Counselor Calloway, she said, I'd like a recess. 15 minutes. I suggest you use them wisely. In the hallway, I stood by the window facing the parking structure and drank from a paper cup. Finch stood beside me. She didn't say anything for a while. The income argument is gone, she said finally. The trust holds. The paternity finding changes the support calculation significantly. Calloway knows it. She finished her water. What does he do next? Goes back in there and proposes a settlement that looks like a concession but is actually a controlled retreat. Finch looked at me. We don't take it. We don't take it. We don't take it. She paused. The decision about Wren, that's the part of this I'll remember. I didn't say anything. Most men in your position would have used it differently. Most men in my position aren't thinking about what she needs when she's 12. I am. Finch nodded. We went back in. Calloway proposed the settlement. It was, as Finch had predicted, a controlled retreat, reduced support figure, modified custody arrangement, the trust acknowledged and not contested. It was reasonable. It was the kind of reasonable a man who had been living inside this for 10 months might accept out of sheer exhaustion. I leaned over to Finch. Tell him we'll consider it. She looked at me. Tell him we'll consider it, I said, and then tell him I'd like to address the court directly. 1 minute. Her expression said several things simultaneously. Then, all right. Judge Osei granted the request. I stood up. Your Honor, I want to be clear about something before any settlement is entered into the record. I kept my voice at conversation level, the broadcast voice, the one that carries without effort. The trust I established is not a negotiating position. It is not leverage. It is a structure I built for 2 children who are going to need stability regardless of how this proceeding concludes. I am not asking this court to give me anything. I am asking the court to confirm what is already in place. I paused. My wife is divorcing me after 11 years. I let that sit for a moment. I agreed to proceed without contest. Then I reached into my jacket and set the envelope on the bar. Judge Osei's face was careful and still. The evidence is already before the court, I said. I'm not asking for anything beyond what the law provides and what those children need, that's all. I sat down. Ellen's face had gone the color of old concrete. Calloway was writing on his legal pad with the concentrated attention of a man who needed to be doing something with his hands. Judge Osei looked at the documents in front of her for a long moment. Then she said 3 words. The trust stands. The rest of the hearing took 43 minutes. The judge modified the support calculation based on the paternity findings. 1 child confirmed. Wren's arrangement addressed separately through a guardianship structure Finch had prepared in advance. Ellen's income argument was substantially reduced. The royalties and property remained in trust. Calloway collected his exhibits without drama. That's what good attorneys do. They absorb a loss without making it personal, because personal costs money they could be spending on the next client. Ellen did not look at me as we filed out of the courtroom. In the main corridor, the marble floors carried our footsteps in every direction. I walked toward the exit. Finch came alongside me. That was an interesting choice, she said, addressing the court directly. I needed it on the record. It's on the record. She paused. The line about proceeding without contest, was that accurate? Close enough. We pushed through the main doors into the February air. The parking lot was flat and gray, the oaks along the courthouse perimeter throwing the same shadows they always did. What now? Finch said. I pick up my kids at 3. She nodded. I'll file the final documentation this afternoon. Confirmed figures by end of week. I shook her hand. She walked to her car. I stood on the courthouse steps for a moment, looking out at the parking lot, counting nothing in particular. Then I walked to my truck. Ellen came out of the courthouse as I was unlocking the door. She stopped 10 feet from me. Calloway was behind her, already on his phone, not paying attention. She looked at me for a long time. All the performance was gone. The armor, the precision, everything she'd brought into the room. She just looked like a person who had run a very long calculation and arrived at the wrong result. Was any of it real? She said. I thought about that. I thought about 11 years, about 2 kids, about the guest room and the folder and the 41 pages and the 42nd. I thought about Wren's drawing above the kitchen sink. The kids were real, I said. Everything else was what we made it. I got in the truck. In the rearview mirror, I watched her get smaller. The gray coat, the bare February trees, the courthouse behind her. Calloway had ended his call and was saying something to her. She wasn't listening. I turned onto the main road. The passenger headrest still held the faint chemical-sweet trace of Ellen's perfume. I'd noticed it every time I'd gotten into this truck for 10 months. First familiar, then weighted with everything I knew, and now this. Just a smell, fading, belonging to a time that was over. I rolled down the window. February air came in cold and clean. Crestwood pickup lane. 3:02 in the afternoon. Nadia's Outback was 2 spots ahead. She was already out of the car, loading Cal and Mira, when I pulled in. She glanced back. I rolled down my window. How'd it go? She said. The trust stands. She nodded. Not surprised, not celebratory. Just the nod of someone who'd done their own version of this and understood what it cost to get to the other side of it. Cal, Mira, 1 second. She walked back to my window. You doing all right getting there? She looked at me the way she had that first afternoon, not looking away first, not performing anything. You know what ClearPath asked me in the assessment? One of the questions. She paused. It asked, what do you believe about how people should treat each other when everything is already broken? What did you answer? That the answer to that question is the only thing that matters about a person. She looked at me steadily. What would you have said? I thought about Wren's drawing, about the 4 seconds after Finch said her name, about the script I'd written and then deleted, about the label I'd typed, C or T use only. I'd have said the same thing, I said. Marcus came through the school doors, saw me, and raised his hand. Wren was right behind him. I waved back. Nadia walked to her car. She got in without looking back, but through the rear window, I saw her say something to Cal and Mira laughed. Genuine, the real kind. I got out of my truck and walked toward my kids. The February air was cold, and the oaks along the school perimeter were bare, and the light was the flat gray of a day that was nearly done. Marcus reached me first. He was 11 and too old to hug me in a parking lot, mi pareja. Instead, he walked alongside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. Wren took my hand without saying anything. We walked to the truck. I buckled Wren into her seat. She looked up at me with the direct, unguarded attention of a 5-year-old who has not yet learned to look at anything sideways. Daddy, yeah, is our house fixed? I looked at her, the stick figure face, the round head, the arms spread straight out like she was already flying somewhere the rest of us hadn't reached yet. We're building a new one, I said. It's going to be better. She considered this with the gravity of a person for whom the question was entirely practical. Does it have a horse? It might, I said. We'll see. I closed her door, got in, started the engine. In the rear-view mirror, the school, the bare trees, the parking lot thinning out. Nobody standing in anyone's driveway. Nobody watching me leave. Just the road ahead and 2 kids in the back, and the cold, clean air coming in through the window I'd left cracked open. I put the truck in drive and headed home.